Welcome, everyone. I know that a few more people wanted to join us live, and um, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to join us. And so I am recording this so that I can send it out afterwards and everyone can hear what I want to share tonight. And essentially, it is my story and my journey of healing. And it has been such a profound and incredible part of my life. And, you know, I can't see me fulfilling the purpose that God has for me without me having walked through this. And so I hope that some part of my story encourages you, resonates with you, and you know, helps you see your situation through the eyes of hope. And and that you can somehow see yourself in my story. And so I'm going to just start off by introducing myself because some of you who will be watching this don't know who I am. And so my name is Laura Burgoyne. I am a mother of 6 children. I have an older stepdaughter who is married. She has um, one child right now. I'm a grandmother of a beautiful baby girl named Taylor, and they are expecting another. So I will be a grandmother again. That is so exciting for me. I also have 4 of my own boys, ages 15 to 21. And we also adopted my nephew, who is also 15. And so, I have a busy household. In our house, we right now have 4 teenage and young adult boys. And so it is active. And we have our own hobby farm, and my husband also has his own landscape business. And, you know, these things keep us busy. These things, you know, are the driving force behind what we do. And on top of that, also, I do run my own nonprofit called No One Stands Alone. And part of my passion, which is journeying alongside people, really comes out in my story today. And so I really hope that as I share today, that you're going to get, just that sense of, wherever you're at right now, that's not the end of your story. Whatever you're experiencing right now, there's somewhere that you can go from there. And I want you just to look at your situation through the eyes of hope. And the first thing I want to mention is a lot of times when you come to like a call like this, there usually will be a sales pitch at the end. I want you to know right now, I am not doing a sales pitch today. Instead, at the end, I'm going to share with you, if my story resonates with you, a few opportunities that you could, learn more or maybe journey with me, and we could walk towards you finding health for your own personal journey. And, you know, that's the point of this call today. So before I share my story, I want us just to do a really quick wellness assessment, right? Because today what I'm going to be talking about is health and healing and wholeness. And so as I'm going to be asking some questions, and I want in your head, and maybe you write these down, but I want you to rate yourself from 1 to 5. 1 being, that part of your wellness is not very good and needs a lot of work, or a 5 meaning that in that area of your wellness, you got it handled and you feel really great about it and you're moving in good direction. And so the first question I want you to ask yourself is in the area of nutrition. What are your eating habits like? Are they driven by, you know, stress? Are they driven by, desires of wanting a healthy lifestyle? Like what drives what you eat? And so assess yourself from 1 to 5. The next one is digestion. Evaluate how it is that you're feeling after you eat. Do you experience discomfort in your gut? And this is an uncomfortable one. Maybe, you don't want to talk about this very often, but how are your bowel movements, right? Some people I talk to, they go a week, sometimes 2 weeks without having any movement whatsoever. So that plays into the area of digestion. So I want you to rate yourself in that area. The next one is, how active are you? Are you exercising every day? Are you able to get up and move around? Or are you in too much pain and too much discomfort, or not mobile, and you find it very difficult to exercise? How is your energy and focus? Do you experience a lot of brain fog? Do you find it hard to even make it through the day? Like, you have those afternoon crashes, and you just don't have enough energy to get through your days. What is your energy levels like? This next one is a really important one, but how well do you sleep? On a scale of 1 to 5, how well is your sleep? How many hours of sleep are you getting per night? How many times are you getting up in the middle of the night? Is your sleep quality? Are you waking up rested and ready for another day? Another area of wellness that I want you to, think about is, how well do you manage stress? We all have stressful lives. We all go through so many different things. And how are you coping? How are you dealing with those things? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel like stress actually motivates you to make unhealthy choices? What are your coping mechanisms when it comes to stress in your life? Another question to ask yourself is, what influences your decisions about the kind of products that you purchase? Is it the cost? Are you looking for the items that cost the least amount? Are you looking at the ingredients? Are you making the decisions based on accessibility or ease of use? Rate yourself from 1 to 5. And then the last one I want you to think about and consider is, what is your overall health like? Have you been diagnosed with anything? Are you struggling with any ailments? Have things been spoken over your life, almost like a death sentence, that you'll never find a cure for these things? Or do you have other health concerns that maybe don't have a diagnosis, but they're things that are happening in your body that concern you, that you don't really understand, you don't know why it's happening? I want you to think about your overall health and rate yourself from 1 to 5. And so that is a general, wellness assessment. And when you think about that, and you think about all of those different categories, where do you stack up? Where does your health stack up? I know when I was sick, when I was at my worst, I would, in every single one of those categories, I was probably a 1 or a 0. I was not managing very well in any of those categories. And as I go into my story a bit, you're going to see why. You're going to see what was happening in my life. What were some of the choices I was making? And what was it doing to me? What was it doing to my health, and how was it impacting me? So I want you to keep your own numbers, your own assessment of your health in the back of your mind as you're hearing my story. And I want you to see, what you can resonate with. What part of my story is where you're at? What part of my story is maybe where you want to be freed from, where you want to come from? And, keep that in the back of your mind. And, feel free. If something I say really hits the mark for you, write it down. Take an opportunity today to really invest in yourself, and to, let right now be the start of you choosing a new way, choosing some new choices that are going to actually improve your wellness and put you on the path of success. So my story really starts at the beginning. I'm not going to go through all the details, but in a generalized, perspective, I lived a life of chronic stress. as a young girl, I was raised in a home with a very angry, abusive dad. And I took on myself this perception and this mindset that everything depended on me. Everything, I had to do everything for everyone, and I had to be perfect in everything to make sure that, everything went well and nobody was frustrated or angry with me. And that kind of mindset for me set me up for so much failure. It set me up for so much heartache. And, I didn't realize I was doing these things. I didn't realize any of this was playing out in my life, but I lived in a life of chronic stress. And I mean, the earliest memory I have of me not having that life of stress was, from around the age of 5 years old. And, if you think about that, that plays an incredible toll on your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. And by the time I reached the age of 30, I actually had a complete emotional and physical burnout. At this point, when I was in my 30s, I had all four of my boys. I was homeschooling at the time. I was also working full time in my husband's business while homeschooling and taking care of the four boys. And the stress was so heavy. The stress was so difficult. And I remember the day when, I was not coping well. I was not doing well at all. I was not sleeping. I hadn't slept since I started having my boys. I was so sleep deprived, I couldn't function in any way. And I remember this day, um, my kids had gotten up. I didn't even have enough energy to make them food. And they were sitting on the couch watching TV, and I was standing there almost a shell of a person. And I looked at them on the couch. And, what I was experiencing was terrifying me. I thought, my kids are going to grow up with this burnt out mom that can't even care for their basic needs. That was a very difficult revelation for me, to get rock bottom to that point and understand that I had nothing else to give. I had nothing left. I had nothing left to give to my husband, to my children, to my family, to myself. And it was at that point I knew if I didn't get some serious help, I would be finding it, in the hospital or by some other means. And so I called my sister and I talked to her, and she graciously, after talking with her husband, said, "You know what? Me and my husband are going to come live with you and take some of the stress and the strain off of you." And that's what they did. They came and they lived with us for 8 months while I recovered, and I did a lot of that inner work. And I thought at that point in my life that that was going to be my breakthrough, that was going to be the point where everything would change for me, and that I would experience, um, walking into wholeness. But that was the period of time where I actually started to see a real decline in my physical health. The stress that I had gone through over that 30 years of my life was taking a toll on my body. And what we don't always realize is what kind of toll the stress and the things that we go through in life do to our physical health. And, I tried to hide what was happening in my body for the longest of time. And I'm specifically going to go through some of the symptoms I was experiencing because, maybe you experience some of these things too. And maybe you don't know why. And maybe, you even just kind of brush it off or think, I don't know what that is. And I'm just going to not even worry about it. But some of the things that I started to experience was um, shaking. And it wasn't that my body was shaking, but I felt like the world around me was shaking. I started feeling vibrations all the time. and I felt like the floor was moving. Like I even said to my husband, like, can you feel that? Like the floor is shaking. It feels like I'm in an earthquake. And every time I brought it up, he would say, no, I can't feel that. There's nothing happening. And it was such a bizarre feeling that I eventually stopped asking him. I eventually stopped saying, what I was experiencing. But this was happening all the time, constantly. And I didn't realize that that was the start of, a really massive decline in my health. From there, I started to lose feeling in my right side of my body. I was experiencing a lot of numbness. I would get literal shocks of pain. It would start from my hand, go up to my elbow. And then it would go all the way up to my shoulder. Over time, I actually stopped. I had so much pain and inflammation in my shoulder that I couldn't even really move my arm. I had to use my left arm, even just to move my right arm, which is my dominant side. And I was having so much pain and inflammation and discomfort in my legs. And to the point where it was impacting my ability to even walk. I couldn't sit, I couldn't walk for long periods of time, and I was trying to hide it for as long as I could. I lost so much mobility. I lost, essentially the ability to use my right side of my body. I couldn't open jars anymore. If I tried to grab something with my right hand, like my hand couldn't even grasp it, and it would literally fall out of my hand and smash on the floor. And, you would think that by this point, I would clue in and say, you know what, maybe I should go see a doctor. Maybe something's wrong with me. And, there was a few occasions where I did go talk to my one doctor, but every time I went in there and explained to him what I was experiencing, he just said, Laura, it's all in your head. Laura, none of this is real. You're just under so much stress. Let me give you an antidepressant. Let me help you cope with what you're going through. Like, and he wasn't taking me seriously. So part of me was like, is there actually something wrong with me, or is it all in my head? And these symptoms continued to worsen to the point where I started to have chronic pain in my body. It was like constant pain. And it was absolutely the most difficult and most painful in the mornings and at evenings. It made sleeping almost impossible. I could never find a comfortable place or a comfortable, side or whatever to lay on. I was in so much pain. And the catalyst for me to actually, want to find out what was happening to me was actually the sudden death of my aunt. My aunt died suddenly of stage 3 cancer, and nobody even knew that she was sick. She had been going through some things, and she had hidden it so well that none of us had any idea of what she was going through. And that moment for me was a light bulb moment. For years, I had been ignoring my physical symptoms. I had been, just saying, whatever this is, it'll go away, or it's not that bad, or I hid it from everyone that I knew. And it was on that day that I said to myself, Laura, if you don't figure this out, you're likely going to have the same outcome as your aunt. And so it was that day that I started seeking real answers from doctors. And, obviously my first doctor thought nothing was wrong with me. He said it was all in my head. And so at that point, I decided I got to find someone who's willing to find the deeper uh, issues that I'm going through. And so I was able to find a good doctor and at the same time go to a naturopath, and they tag teamed, they worked together, and until we found some answers. I had to go to specialists after specialists, and finally I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And that day was the day that I had to make a choice. Because when the specialist told me basically he said, Laura, I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is we know what you're struggling with. It's fibromyalgia. The bad news is that there is no cure and that the only thing that we can do is manage your pain. And he prescribed 2 different medications to me, Cymbalta and gabapentin. And I researched those 2 medications. And after researching them, I said to myself, I am not putting that stuff in my body. And I had a choice that day to believe the report of the doctor that what I was experiencing had no cure and that I was hopeless to do anything about it, and that the only thing I could manage was my pain, or, believe that there had to be hope. There had to be another answer. There had to be another way. And I chose hope. And it was at that point that I started researching a lot about fibromyalgia. And I actually found a doctor online on YouTube, and his title on his video, his teaching video, was 100% success rate of reversing fibromyalgia. So of course that intrigued me. And I listened to his video, and what he had to say was so compelling and, really aligned with what I already believed about wellness and health. And he claimed in this video and taught that 100% of all autoimmune diseases are rooted in poor gut health. And the way he explained it was so incredible that I was just like, there has to be something to this. And so I set out on a journey of doing a lot of research about gut health, fibromyalgia. And the more I did research, the more I found other doctors and other specialists and professionals saying the same message. And this wasn't the message I was getting from doctors. This isn't the message I was getting from the hospitals or the nurses. This is what I was getting from naturopaths and from people who are really interested and invested in natural health. And they were saying, instead of, just dealing with the symptoms of pain, let's get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem was actually in my gut health. And so I started implementing absolutely everything I was learning about gut health and immunity. And a few things I found out along the way, and you might be interested in some of these numbers, is 75% of your body's immune system is located in your gut. If your gut health is not good, then that means 75% of your immune function in your body is impaired. Think about that in regards to your overall health. How often are you getting sick? And when you do get sick, how long are you sick for? This is something to take into consideration. Another really interesting fact is that 90% of serotonin and other important hormones are actually produced in your gut. When you think about that, that's incredible. We often thought that those things are produced in the brain, but they're actually produced in your gut. So when we have not good gut health, those neurotransmitters, those hormones, those things are not being produced. Why do you think that we struggle with so much anxiety, so much depression, so much stress? Our ability to cope with things in our life are diminished. And another fact, which I also find so fascinating, is you have more neurotransmitters in your gut than you have in your brain. Think about that. Your brain is the center. You think that that's what controls your whole body, but it's actually in your gut. And the more I implemented what I was learning, the more positive changes I was seeing in my health. I saw my pain decreasing. I saw my energy levels improving. I saw my focus returning. I was able to work more, longer, and with less pain and discomfort. I was having less flare-ups, and when I had the flare-ups, they were not as intense and they didn't last as long. I also found that my sleep was improving. Finally, after 15 years of not sleeping through the night, I was starting to sleep through the night. I was starting to sleep for 8 to 9 hours a night. I was sleeping soundly straight through the night, and I was starting to wake up refreshed in the morning. And I want to talk about that sleep a little bit more because I think we underestimate how important our sleep is. Sleep is so important in our health and our wellness and our body restoring itself. And I want to explain a little bit why. In sleep, there are different stages of sleep, and there's two particular ones I want to talk a little bit about here. And the first one is deep sleep. It's also known as our slow wave sleep. And that's when our brain waves are at the lowest level, our breathing is at the lowest level, we're at the most relaxed state. And this is when our body actually goes into a process of physical restoration. It starts releasing growth hormone. It starts repairing tissue. It supports new muscle growth and boosts our immune function. So when we think about sleep, often we think, well, I can get by with only 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And, when we do sleep, it's not quality. We lay there and we toss and turn for hours. And then, when we wake up, we're not refreshed. That is not helping us get into deep sleep. That's not allowing our bodies to restore themselves. And, some of you may not be people of faith or Christians that are listening to this, but I believe that there is a God and He created our bodies. And when I think about the intricacies of our bodies and how they're created and how they work together, I'm just in awe because God created our bodies to be able to heal themselves and repair themselves. And that happens during our sleep. And there's another stage of sleep, which is called REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement. And that occurs when that is happening, that's when we actually have dreams. And that's often linked with memory consolidation, learning, and processing our emotions. So that is important when it comes to like stress regulation and coping mechanisms and allowing, our emotions to be renewed and restored. And so if we're not getting adequate sleep, we're not having that time of restoration. And so it was absolutely imperative. And, one of the biggest keys to me, stepping into wholeness was sleep, because it was during those periods of sleep that my body was actually healing itself and restoring itself. And so remember the assessment we did at the beginning, and we said, how is your sleep? If you don't sleep well, if you're not sleeping through the night, if you have many sleep disturbances, this is likely part of the problem that's impacting your health. And that's something that can be looked at. That's something that we can create strategies for and really help you improve. So what did I do? My health was improving. I was getting my focus back. My pain was decreasing, and how long did that take me? I remember from the point I started my process to the point where I was like, wait a minute, I don't have any pain left. And you know what? I just actually worked a 12-hour day and I feel no pain. And I was able to sleep straight through the night and wake up the next morning and be completely refreshed. From the start of me starting to research that to the point where I realized that my body was restored, it was about a year. And that revelation was incredible for me, to realize that I had been able to 100% reverse every symptom that I had been experiencing that my doctors told me was incurable, that I would be living with it for the rest of my life. And I'm glad to say today that it is almost 4 years now that I've been living 100% symptom-free of the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. I have so much energy. I wake up in the morning, refreshed, ready to work hard. I work long days. I sleep well at night. And, this is just my new life. I feel like I have my life back. And it's what I need in order to, fulfill the purposes that God has for me. And so I want to share with you some of the things I did. What were some of the steps that I took? Well, the first thing I did was I removed any food from my diet that was causing me inflammation, bloating, gas, pain, or that I knew based on the research that I was doing was actually feeding the bad bacteria in my gut and causing my gut health to be unbalanced. And so the first thing I did was just take all of those things completely out of my diet. Basically wanted to starve the bad bacteria in my gut and start from a clean slate. So that was the very first thing I started to do. The second thing I did was I started to add back to my diet things that were rich in probiotics. Foods such as fermented foods. I started making my own kombucha. Things that I knew promoted good, healthy gut balance. Those were the foods I started to focus on. And these are the things that I learned in all of my research of, how do you restore your gut health? And on top of that, I started adding doTERRA's CPTG, which is certified pure tested grade digestive enzymes and their probiotics. And I also added a whole food bioavailable supplementation because what I was realizing too in our diet is that we are not getting the nutrients that we need anymore. Our food has been so depleted through different practices of farming, the GMO practices, how they spray our crops. All of those things have depleted the nutritional value of our food. And so I also take, a whole food, all natural supplementation to help put back those good minerals and vitamins that your body needs. The third thing I did was I reduced stress. And I know that this is a large problem for many of us is stress. And so I tried to decrease stress as much as I could, find more opportunities for rest, and I developed better coping strategies. And part of that was going through an inner journey with God of understanding why I do the things I do, why I make the decisions I make. What were my triggers? What were my default reactions to stress? And I needed to replace them with something healthy. I need to replace them with something aligned with the truth. And, in that part of my story, God actually brought me to a revelation of a trauma that I had at the age of 5, which started that whole drive in me, like I was telling you at the start, that thing that created that lifestyle of stress in my life started at the age of 5. And so God actually took me through a really profound inner healing experience of dealing with that trauma so that I could start making some better choices in my life. And you know what? Maybe you're going to find the same thing. Maybe you're going to, as you start diving into this and you start, thinking about, well, why, when this happens, this is how I react, or this is the decisions that I make, and this is how it's impacting my health in a negative way. And through that, I believe you're going to make some connections. You're going to see some trends. You're going to have some revelations. And it's in that place, I believe God's going to show you where that comes from, where that's been rooted. And it's most likely rooted in some kind of lie or rooted in some kind of misconception or some kind of trauma. And those are all things that can be healed. Those are all things that can be resolved and moved past. But if if you're not aware of something and you don't know it's there, how can you deal with it, right? So the moment we become aware of something, that's the moment where we can actually start doing something about it. The fourth thing is I started to improve my sleep. I prioritized rest. And, I started removing things from my routine of rest that were inhibiting me from having a good night's rest. That's a big subject. I'm not going to go into all the details but what I realized was if I'm not resting and sleeping well, then my body doesn't have that opportunity to heal itself. And so I started making every attempt that I could to improve my sleep. And then the last thing that I want to share with you today is that I took inventory of all of the things that I was using in my life, whether it be, you know, the products I use on my body, the products I use in my house. And the more I started reading ingredients and I started researching, I realized that the toxic load that was on my body, that my body was unable to, effectively filter out was incredible. And what I realized is a lot of things, you see on the packaging, it'll say, oh, there's these toxins in it, but they're within the allowable limit. But what they don't tell you is that the exposure that you're supposed to have with that is maybe once in a week or once in a month. But you're using some of these products daily. Sometimes you're using them multiple times a day. Sometimes you're using them in multiple different ways. And so what we don't realize is though that in the one-time use is maybe within their allowable limit. The amount of times that we're actually using these products is causing such a strain on our body's detox system that we're not able to get rid of all those toxins. And so it's being stored in our tissues. And so what I started to do was find those things in my home, those things that we were using that were essentially toxic to us, and start one by one replacing them with something that was natural, something that was healthy, and reduce that toxic load on my body and my family's life. And I saw incredible changes. There was other things that I did in that process, and actually, I actually wrote it all down in this book. It's called Finally Free. It goes through every aspect of my healing, including my journey of healing from the trauma associated with some of the decisions I was making. And so if that's of interest to you, you can contact me and I will tell you how you can get a copy of that. But my whole story is in that book. And the reason it's called Finally Free is because that's how I feel. I feel like I am finally free. I had lived this way since the time I was a little girl, and it had caused so much issues in my life, in my health, in my mental health, in my physical health. And I finally am free. I can finally live the life that God created for me. And so, why is this important? Why am I sharing my story with you today? It's because I'm passionate about helping others do the same. Not only in their physical life, but also in their emotional life, their spiritual life. And, as a mentor, and as a doTERRA wellness advocate, it is my passion and it is my job to walk with others and help them find solutions to whatever it is that they're struggling with. And in particular, today we're talking about health and wellness. And so it's my privilege and it's my passion to help you find natural solutions for your health, ones that won't be just covering the symptoms, won't just be, patching a hole, but will actually get to the root of the issue, help you figure out why you're struggling with these things, and find natural products that will support wellness in your life so that you can start restoring your health and then live your very best life. And that's one desire I have. I want to live a long life, and I want to live it with vitality my whole life. We see today people are living a longer period of time, but the problem is they're spending the last 8 to 10 years of their life in a home, heavily medicated. Often they don't have clarity of mind. So many struggles are happening. That's not the way I want to live. I want to live with a sound mind my whole life. I want to be till the moment I, fall asleep and take my last breath. I want to be living my life to the fullest. I want to be vibrant. I want to have energy. I want to be, like that, you know, the Energizer bunny that just keeps going. And then when the batteries are gone, then that's the end of my time, right? I don't want to die with infirmity and sickness and disease. And I believe that that's possible. With the journey of wellness that I've been on, I know that it's possible. And I've been seeing more and more people that have adopted this lifestyle of natural health, living long, vibrant lives. I actually just met someone the other day, and they're well into their 90s. You would never know it. You would think they're maybe in their 60s. They're still going like gangbusters, and there's no sign of an end for them. They have no ailments, they have no limitations in their movement, and that's what I want for myself. And I know it's possible. And so I want to walk beside you. I want to encourage you. I want to hold you accountable to your health goals. And I want to share with you any knowledge that I have. And I'm constantly researching, I'm constantly learning. And so, what is it that I have to give to you today? Well, first of all, it's hope. If you've been given a diagnosis or you've had things spoken over you that has caused you to feel hopeless about your situation, I want to encourage you. Number one, God has a, God has the final say. And if you are open to the possibility that there's another way, I believe God will lead you and show you what that way is. And he will open the doors to you to actually experience something new. The other thing is that you don't have to live with whatever it is that you're struggling with. Maybe it's emotional. Maybe you struggle with so much anxiety you can't make it through the day. Maybe you can't hold down a job. Maybe you experience so much physical pain that, even getting up and going for a walk is difficult. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, I want you to know that there's hope. I want you to know that there is solutions out there, and it's not going to come the conventional way. You can't fix disease with a chemical. You can't fix what's wrong with something that's synthetic and man-made. We have to go back to what's natural, what God created. And I have found that in doTERRA's line of products. And that's why I actually decided to become a doTERRA wellness advocate, because I not only have seen such transformation in my health, but I also see, the science behind their products, the purity behind their products, how they won't even release a product unless it's not only been tested in-house, but also by a third party to make sure that it's pure and there's nothing added to it. And so I trust it. And so what can I offer you today? Well, first of all, I offer free wellness consultations. If this is something that resonates with you, if part of my story has touched a part of, where you're at in your life, and you're like, you know what, I want to experience freedom in whatever area it is, take me up on my free wellness consultation. Let us meet together. Let me hear your story. Let me, see where you're at. And let's talk about your lifestyle goals. Let's talk about where you want to be. What are your dreams? What are your passions? What are you being hindered by? And let's together come up with a plan. And figure out how you can start walking towards wellness in every area of your life. And we can create a plan. You know, we usually start with a 90-day plan and then reassess after that. And it will be based completely on your own needs. That's why I find it difficult, you know, in a class setting like this to really, you know, recommend the right thing to everybody because everyone's coming from a different place. Everyone's at a different level of wellness or health, and you have different goals. You have different things that you are struggling with that you want to improve. And so that's why I really like to focus on one-on-one wellness consultations where we can just meet and talk one-on-one and focus on your particular need. There is one other opportunity that is coming up on May 24th. We have a corporate event happening, and Emily Wright, who is one of the founding directors of doTERRA, is actually coming to Calgary. And there is a mini, I'll call it a mini conference. It's about two hours long, and there's a little bit of an expo where you can go from the different tables and learn more about some of the different aspects of health and some of the products that are available. And if that's of interest to you, that's happening at the Sheraton Hotel in Northeast Calgary on Saturday, May 24th from about 9:30 to 12:30. And there is a $15 entrance fee for that, but you get, you know, a free oil at the door and other free promotions as you go there. So it's well worth the money that you invest. And most of all, the things you're going to learn about wellness, the things about your health is invaluable. And I will be there. I would love for you to join me there. And if you do come see me, come find me, because I will have a special gift for you. But those are the different ways that I can be of service to you, that I can help my story make a difference in your life. You know, maybe you want to read my story and purchase my book, Finally Free. If that's where you're at, then let me know and I will let you know how you can get a copy. Or maybe you're ready to really say, you know what, I want to tackle my health. Maybe you're at a place where I was when my aunt passed away, and you decide today, I don't want to live another day like this, and I want to make a choice today to figure out what's going on. I don't have all the answers. I'm not a doctor, but what I can do is share the knowledge that I have and recommend different things that you could do or should do that I did, you know. Maybe it'll require you to go see a naturopath. Maybe it will require you to get some blood work done. But we'll do this together. We'll walk together. We'll journey together. And I will share whatever resources that I have with you and help you get to where you need to be and support you along the way. And I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to share. So most of all, I just hope that my story, that my journey of healing and health really encourages you to not give up. It encourages you to, you know, look a bit deeper and seek for solutions in your situation, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. And, you know, keep in the back of your mind that assessment we did at the beginning. How are you doing in each area of wellness that we talked about? How are you doing? And is there any area that you want to see improvement in and you want to see forward movement in? Because if there is, then, you know, let's have a chat. Let's talk about it and let's see if there's anything that we can do to make you grow and heal and get stronger in those areas. And so thank you for listening. And I look forward to potentially walking with you and journeying with you to find health and wholeness. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you later. Bye.